Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk community. Let's talk about all the good things and the bad things that may be. Let's talk about us. Let's talk about us. Let's talk about us. Let's talk.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk About It with me and you. Let me introduce my co-host, Mr. Glenn Greenwich, the Honorable Mayor of Southern Boulevard, Mr. Paul Barkley, and Delicia Davis. Hi, guys.
Hello.
We have a special guest today. His name is Verity Rollins, and he works in the mental health, substance abuse field. He is a program director. Welcome to our world.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, I'm gonna start off with a quote that I came up with that I was reading. Mental health affects 1 in every 5 people each year, and up to 50% of people in a lifetime. Now that's really devastating because when you talk of those very high numbers, and I know years and years ago, 30 years ago, we didn't have these type of numbers. So let's start off with Verity. Tell me, being that you work in a field like, mental health, substance abuse, homelessness, all this stuff, where do you see this coming at? How do you promote mental health in our society?
How do you promote mental health in our society?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've been in the field for quite a while. I'm not a therapist or a psychiatrist, but I can definitely tell you that part of the issue is that everybody doesn't understand. Mental health does not affect just like 50% of the people. Everybody deals with mental health. It's like a standard across the board. It's probably mental health is people get affected in like different I guess it affects everybody in a little different way, and it's like varying degrees of mental health. But everybody deals with some kind of mental health issue, whether you're undiagnosed or diagnosed. So 100% of the people have some mental health issue that they probably don't even know. Everybody gets depressed.
Right.
Issue is, how depressed do you get? But
Okay.
everybody gets depressed.
Right.
Everybody has anxiety. It depends on how bad your anxiety is. Is your anxiety crippling that you can't do anything? Or is it just like, just like a little worry here and there? But everybody has mental health issues. And if you really pay attention to a lot of the people, you will definitely see that there has some kind of idiosyncrasy that they have. 100% of the people has 100% of mental health issues.
So this mental health issues is not something that just came up in the past 2 or 3 years.
No.
This has been going on for years. It's just now becoming permanent.
Since human beings have been on this earth, human beings have had mental health issues. It just depends on what it is, the severity of what you have.
What would you say is the percentage that is treatable, self-treatable, as opposed to the percentage that actually needs professional help?
So, in my experience, I think everybody can self-treat the mental health. Depends on, really and truly, it's the understanding. The first thing is understanding that you have a mental health issue. So regardless of if you are, whether the issue is if you feel that you have it.
Okay.
So meaning
Recognizing it.
and that is the key thing, and that with anybody is recognizing that you have a problem. That hey, if you think that everybody's watching you. So if I walk in here and I'm like, everybody's watching me, and I feel it in this office, and then I go somewhere else and I'm like, everybody's watching me. At some point you have to realize that, what? Maybe everybody's not watching me. Maybe it's me.
Mm-hmm.
It's just maybe it's me. And then it also depends on how society views mental health. So back then, let's say I'm saying back then.
20 years ago.
I'm not even saying 20 years ago. I'm saying depending on how you are. So mental health has always been part of it. If you look at this, you talk about the seers, a lot of them mental health issues. They were getting visions, they were getting this. By today's standards, we would say that you have like schizophrenia. Something like that.
Yes. Okay.
That you were seeing things that are not there. But back then, way back, if you call you a shaman, say you're a seer, we would come to you for advice.
Gotcha.
We don't view mental health the same way. You kind of looked upon, you're like crazy, this person. But it really depends. First thing in dealing with mental health is to realize that you have an issue.
Okay.
And then once you realize you have an issue, you're able to basically compensate for the issue.
Okay. Paul, I want to ask you the same question.
The way people perceive that, let's say 20 years, 30 years, or let's say from the beginning of time, where something was wrong with you as an individual, like you have the problem. Nowadays, because we have things like the DSM-5, we are able to be able to categorize exactly what is going on with you, going by the signs and the symptoms of your behavior.
Now, the DSM-5, say a little bit more about what. So that's a test that they do to.
Yes, it's more like a mental status exam that psychiatrists. It's a book that the psychiatrists and psychologists, licensed mental health counselors, licensed clinical social workers, they use this book in order to determine or to diagnose you.
Okay.
Now, the best way to me, to the original question, to promote mental health, one of the ways is what we're doing right here today. Because speaking directly to the community and being able to give useful information to people who need to be educated, that is the start.
True.
And to piggyback off of what the gentleman said, knowing is half the battle. It's the same thing like if you have a substance abuse disorder. Until you realize that I'm tired of being tired and I have gone over the edge and I'm gone so far, now I'm going to go seek treatment. Well, it's the same thing with the mental health disorder. Once you realize, everywhere I go, it feels like somebody's watching me, looking at me, following me. Maybe I need to talk to somebody about it. And in some cases, family members and friends may even suggest that, hey, you might need some professional help. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, also keep in mind too, it's a difference between depression, because everybody's going to get depressed at some point in their life, depending on what you're dealing with. But remember, the difference between regular depression and clinical depression.
Can you give me a little example? What's the difference?
Right. So again, in regular depression, it means that sometime during your life, you're going to get depressed about something, a situation that might transpire, a relationship that you're in, somebody let you down, you're going to be depressed. And being depressed is normal. When it gets on the verge of clinical depression means now it's stopping you from moving forward in life. It's almost like it paralyzes you. You want to stay in the bed. You want to cut off all the lights. You want to turn off your phone. You don't want to deal with or talk to any human being outside of your bedroom. Now you're in the clinical stages of depression, which means you need to definitely seek some help.
Okay.
You see, so it's the same thing with anxiety. Anxiety is actually a good thing because it's going to form that flight or fight syndrome, which makes you aware of when you're walking down the street and something happens, you're able to respond to it. Now, there's another step of generalized anxiety, where now I'm nervous and I'm scared of everything.
Right.
And there's actually nothing happening. I'm fearful somebody's going to jump out on the corner. I'm fearful the car's going to come up on the sidewalk and hit me. And now that anxiety turns into panic attacks, heart palpitations. I'm starting to get nervous and I'm sweating. I mean, I'm starting to go through all of these signs, and a lot of them are physical because I have anxiety.
Okay.
Don't forget, a lot of these things also come on because of trauma. So you have, and that's what a lot of people don't understand it. So trauma, everybody has some type of trauma. It depends on how you deal with it. So sometimes, like dealing with this COVID that we just went through, a lot of young people, especially children. They are, they were indoors, couldn't go outside, didn't want, Now a lot of them really don't want to go outside. They don't want to go outside. And then coupled with social media, TV, stuff like that, streaming now, that is, a lot of them, they don't. So you develop this anxiety, this fear to go outside now. And that's trauma, and that's actually trauma. It's a traumatic situation. This is how you're handling it. You really don't want to go out now, especially if you don't have to.
Would you say that, because I know that trauma now is a big conversation in terms of generational, cultural, environmental, and of course in the direct family. Would you say that now that in the state that we are, awareness of mental health, trauma has now kind of presents itself and become a more of a factor than it has been recognized in the past?
Yes. So I guess now people are seeing that, okay, like what's causing this, and people are looking into it more, because it's not just like a poor person thing. It's like it's affecting everybody. So yeah, trauma is like the big thing, and it can be that can be the root cause of a lot of issues. Hurt people.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
then,
like that.
and then sometimes somebody's raped, they actually become rapists themselves, or they actually go the other direction. Depends on how you perceived and how you handle the trauma, but it happens.
I have a question regarding trauma. I feel like it's becoming more of a normalcy post-pandemic. I guess it's a question for everyone. How do you feel we can begin the healing process?
Or is there a healing process?
Because some people say you can't be healed ever.
So the thing is, let's look at trauma this way. Everybody goes through trauma, so it's something that you really can't escape. For instance, if you have a child and you just hate liars, right? Or you beat your child because the child does something. So let's say, you come home, there's a broken vase, you said who did it, and you get upset. You usually would beat your child. So that's trauma. So
For who?
for the child.
Okay.
So think about it. You come home broken, or let's say you have more than one child. This is broken. Decide that you are upset. You beat the child. What does trauma do? You do behaviors to compensate for certain things because of this traumatic experience. I'm gonna get beat. So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna lie. So people hate liars. If you look back in somewhere in their history, I guarantee you, lying is a way of protecting yourself from being hurt or injured. And you can look at most behaviors that people do. Any behavior that somebody would look at me like, that's kind of like a negative behavior. Like, you're with your husband or whatever. You start an argument. He decides that I'm not going to partake in this. I'm leaving. At some point in his life, he's learned that it's best for him to exit from arguments. That's trauma that you've had experienced, and then you've come up with a response to that trauma.
Very, very true. Very true. And trauma actually works. It's very funny how trauma works, because the example he gave was right on, but there's also the other side of trauma. So let's use the same example. Argument with the wife. He decides, you know what, I'm not going to engage in this, and he leaves. Another person who also has experienced trauma may say, you know what, when I was a little kid, I was always taught, shut up, don't talk. I'm an adult now. I'm going to engage in this argument with this individual, my wife, and this is their response to trauma. So you see the two different sides?
Yes.
Depending on who the individual is, how the trauma affected them in their life. So you can be the person who's going to be passive and say, you know what, you're right. And if you continue on, I'm just going to walk away because I don't want to engage. On the other hand, you're going to get the person who is going to fully engage. And this is where it turns out to the big blowed out argument in the middle of the restaurant. You understand what I mean? And again, stems from trauma. Nowadays, they consider a person to have gone through a traumatic experience if you was ever incarcerated. Because you have to remember,
Yeah.
in prison, it's a daily struggle to stay alive to see the next day.
Correct.
They consider trauma to be if you've been homeless before, not having a roof over your head, sleeping in the park, in the hallway, abandoned building, rooftops, basements. That's a traumatic experience.
Foster care, growing up in the foster care system,
Also being growing up poor. Extremely
growing up poor.
That's a big trauma that nobody really identifies as a
Addresses.
trauma, because some of those guys grew up to be rich, and then the way they interact with money is like, oh, why would you be doing that? And then they grow up the other way.
Right.
Depends on how you.
How do you I guess I don't even know if you can unbundle it, because for example, so you have trauma, then trauma leads to chemical abuse. Is that like a outcome of the trauma, or is that something that
I mean, the way to unpack it and understand is the same thing with like mental health, with anything. You have to realize and you have to say, hey, something is wrong with the way I am responding to this.
okay?
And then you can go back, since you know something is wrong, then you could go back and it's like, where did this come from? How did this happen to me? Where did this come from? Why am I doing this? And then you're able to address it and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Next time I have an argument, I'm not going to run away. I'm going to address this argument. Or next time I have an argument, I'm going to address the argument, but I'm not going to let it allow it to go to this level. I'm going to leave before that happens. So it depends. Once you find out you have an issue, then you can address it. Same thing with substance abuse, same thing with mental health. Hey, something within yourself, you have to say, listen, something is not right here. And a lot of people, some of them, when you have mental health issues and then you start bringing in drugs and stuff like that, you don't ever get to the point where you realize that you have an issue.
Right. And actually, I wanted to ask you something about that, because you said we can all, in some way, self-help. But for those who can't identify their issues, what do you suggest the people surrounding them do?
Well, for those who can't, so then it really depends. I think the best thing that you can do is you can try and bring some kind of good trauma into their life, or good like behavioral programming into their life. Basically, support, love, show them that you're still there, that you're still willing to care, that you're not going to throw them away. Things like that. I mean, and sometimes you have to go through it with them. But then there are some points where, you're like, you can't do this
Can't
anymore,
bring
because
that
then it's affecting your mental health, or it's draining to you.
But also keep in mind too that before you get to that point to where you give up, seek therapy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because remember, this is a process. The person didn't experience that a traumatic experience all in one time and develop this response. Because remember, for every action, there's a reaction. So they didn't just experience that trauma right then and there and now just decide that this is how I'm going to deal with it. This happens over time. So just like therapy will help you unbag a lot of the stuff, because not everybody's going to be able to deal with and unload all of this baggage on their own. They're going to need to go through the steps. They're going to need to go through the process. So before a person would give up on their marriage, before a person would say, I'm not going to talk to my kids anymore. You understand? Therapy will help you work through these issues.
And then you also got to realize that recovery in anything, recovery from trauma, recovery from substance abuse, recovery from mental health, you're always in recovery. You're never not in recovery. So you can start recovery process at 20 years old. You still have to keep that up until the day you die, because you're always in recovery.
Lifelong process.
Yes.
Now,
It'll never change.
now, obviously there's one-on-one therapy and there's also group therapy.
Yes, there's
And-
also art therapy.
That's-
different types of therapy.
So there was a lot of different types of
It
therapies.
really depends, and I think nowadays you're seeing how creativity come into it, where it's not the same thing. So back in the days when dealing with substance abuse, dealing with mental health issues, they were like, you know what, take your medication. This is what you need to do. Go
Right.
take your medication, basically forcing it down somebody's throat. Nowadays, you have to realize that there are different ways of dealing with things. You don't have to take you necessarily don't have to take medication to deal with certain things. You don't. You can just go to therapist. You can speak to somebody. You can write it out. You have issues. You can write it out in journaling. You can paint. You can work on something. You can take some kind of exercise class. You can do different things, different coping strategies. And part of the thing is coming up with coping strategies for yourself to deal with certain things that you have. Marijuana is legal now, depending on how you look at that and what your perception of that is. People use that for different things. People who have chronic pain, cancer, they use marijuana
To eliminate the pain, yeah.
Then they have ones who suffer from anxiety. There's certain strains that you take that will help
Calm you down or
calm you
whatever,
down.
yeah.
Then you have ones who say that you feel a little depressed. There's certain marijuana that gives you energy that kind of just
Pick you up.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like the sativa strain, strand. A lot of there's a
Yeah,
lot of
puts the
different things.
pep back in your step.
People they just end up some people end up just smoking the stuff and they actually do you really know what you're smoking? There's this, there's that for different things. So it's very creative now on ways that you can handle and deal with trauma, deal with different things. But everybody has to realize that you have an issue, and then realize what traumatic experience brought you to this issue.
Definitely, no question about that.
Now, I want to go into a little bit of the community. How can we solve mental health problems in our community? Now, we all remember the saying that it takes a village to raise children, right? And as the years have gone by, we have been taught just to do the opposite. Let's mind our own business. We hear that the child is getting beaten next door. We hear the woman getting beaten next door. This is not our problem. Stay out of it and so forth, because, we might get hurt ourselves. Or even on the train, we see certain situations and people like, well, we're going to step back, as opposed to maybe let's say something. Now, we see that there is a big problem in our society across the board with this mental health problems, with all the school violence, with all the violence, period, all around us. I mean, going to a movie theater, did you think that you might have to wear a bulletproof vest because you're going to get shot up in the movie theater? No. I mean, you went to the movie theater to have fun and have your popcorn and hot dogs and see a good movie. Not that you was going to die.
Right, you have a point.
Or just getting on the regular bus. The regular bus, like over here a few months ago in Queens, somebody got on the 6 bus and the bus got shot up. I mean, how do you prepare yourself for all this mentally?
You can't prepare yourself for it, because there's no way for you to know in advance that it's going to happen, or else you wouldn't go to that neighborhood or be in that particular place to avoid that from happening to you. So you can't prepare yourself for it, just like there's no way, to the original question, to solve mental health in the community. It's impossible to solve it, because remember, most mental health conditions comes from the environment. It comes from genetics. I mean, there's multiple ways a person, I think I spoke on the show once before about the difference between Cammie and Micah.
Right.
Chemically abused, mentally ill. So you abuse a substance for too long, it alters your brain chemistry. Now you have developed this mental health condition. In other cases, when it's genetics, mentally ill, and now, okay, I don't want to take the prescribed medications from the doctor, so I'm going to self-medicate. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes,
so
I do.
There's no way to actually solve it, because if you're already pre-exposed to it, like you're born with depression, or you're born with anxiety, or you're born with schizophrenia, then there's no way to solve it. There's no cure for a mental health condition. You can take psychotropic medications to help manage the symptoms, and it works excellent in conjunction with talk therapy. But to actually solve it, like
No.
I haven't come across the way. Maybe somebody here can share how you can solve it, which would enlighten me.
Well,
Delicia, what do you think?
I'm not sure if the proper words are this is how we solve mental illness or this is how we solve mental health, but I feel like just the same way that we can cope and heal and ailments physically, I feel like mental health works in a very similar way where we have to find new ways to resolve these issues. We have to find ways to cope a little bit better so that they're not affecting our day to day, so that they're not impacting our growth process and our livelihood. So, maybe it's not we're trying to solve it, but we're trying to overcome the hardships. We're trying to bring brighter days. We're trying to find, I think Verity mentioned a few ways that the healing process can happen with exercise, with journaling. I'm all into literacy. So I do believe that, reading, writing, talking, gaining support networks, taking medication when necessary, all of these things are valid and coming closer towards solving it.
Right. Well,
I think we need all of it.
right. Well, those sound more like management.
So
Okay.
I think so. Your question is a little off because
Okay.
you said you
Well,
asked
what
one
does it
thing
mean
to
to
solve it,
solve? Yeah.
but then you went into like certain aspects more of a thing. So
Well,
what I
let me
can say-
let me break it down.
no, I understand.
Okay, go ahead.
So what I was gonna say is from the question that you asked and all the stuff that you put out in the question. Yes, I do think we can solve the whole mental health, like the mental health thing, mental health issue. But the issue is not really like it's not the solving of it is not like really a personal thing. It's like a societal change.
Right.
So let's start with something. You talked about, let's say, things are happening in the community and like people are getting beat, this and that, like somebody's getting beat, if a child's getting beat, this is happening. Back in the days, let's say when we had a strong black community. Or let's not even take the black community. Let's take the Italian community. Let's take the Italians. You cannot have something happen in that community and they do not know. Back in the days when, let's say in the days when John Gotti and them, they were there, and where you talk about gang members wore suits. Remember those days? Gang members wore suits.
Yes.
Their suits, ties, hard bottom shoes,
yes.
and everything. And if you needed to be able to tie, most of the women, they would take their sons to the gangster in the community and say, tie this for him.
Yes, correct. They were like a role model.
The role model. Back in those days, right? If Mary was getting beat by somebody, right? Somebody in the community would catch the guy and say, yo, listen, this cannot happen again.
True.
Or what's going to happen to you. Things like that. In terms of back in the days, there were cops that you always knew because they walked the beat of the street. They always, you knew that, Mr. Jones is a cop. Mr. Jones lives in building 5. Anything happens, I'm going to go and get Mr. Jones, or I'm going to go and get whoever, because they were there.
Correct.
Something happened, somebody got hurt. I'm going to take you over to building 6 because, it's a doctor over there. There's a difference. So when you see all these things happening, you see shootings that are happening, you see things happening. It's not that you can't address these things and you can't solve the issues around them. Really and truly, it's a societal thing.
I agree.
You have to. So they want it that way. Like me personally, I think Facebook, TikTok, all that stuff that we have, I think that's the worst invention in human history.
Okay.
That is the worst invention in human history.
Triggering.
Yeah, because think about it. I don't have these Jordans or whatever, right? Looking at social media, you would think everybody in the world was wearing a pair of Jordans. That's traumatic.
Yes.
Because then you feel inadequate going outside. You don't want to go outside.
With your Converses or something.
My mom can't afford
Right.
this. You're poor. You have other people putting you on social media because, look what they're wearing. They're wearing the fake Jordans. They're doing this. Blah, blah. That's traumatic. You're going to be scared. And you want to know where the depression's going to come from? There it is. You want to know where the anxiety is going to come from? Why you're not going to want to go to school? There it is. That's an issue. You're talking about we're in this whole place now. Now look at this. This is New York City. I know they were getting on. I was watching something and they were getting on Eric Adams about him wanting to bus the immigrants outside of New York.
Yes.
Think about this. You live is there. We don't have a population problem. What happens is that everybody just wants to live in this one little tiny New York City. What is wrong with him busing stuff out to freaking Pennsylvania
Upstate or,
Yeah.
or upstate? And there's nothing wrong with
Albany,
that.
any
It's
place.
space all over the place.
place, yeah.
Just that you can't live. Everybody can't live here.
No, you can't.
So I mean things like that. So homelessness, that you're there. That's a trauma. You're there. You're on the streets. I mean, that's traumatic.
Yeah.
What would you say about this mindfulness approach that is not so new, but it's a way of living that
Everybody has to get on there, and part of the issue is the reason why things are messed up and everybody's bugging out and everything is happening is because they want it that way. You got to look at it. Do whoever makes money, which is most of these corporations, do they make more money with you actually
being calm,
and
right?
No, they don't.
No,
they
they
make
don't.
more money, and then you have to think about it, and it goes in the healthcare system, it goes in everything. You are more profitable to somebody if you're sick.
A commodity.
Yeah.
You're a commodity.
You
Yeah.
you mean to tell me they have cameras and satellites that can drop down and see like a dime on the ground, but you can't tell me you can't stop drugs from coming in this place? You can't tell me that they shouldn't have legalized marijuana a long time ago because they were getting money from it that way.
Yeah.
I think they get less money now than it's legal than they did when it was illegal. I mean, things like that. You mean to tell me that the food that you're eating has nothing to do with this mental health issues that you're
course.
having?
Big issue.
So, and then it's a United States thing, because in other countries Fruit Loops are banned. You have certain food they ban chicken, they ban farm raised fish. These other nations, they do it. And then the most important thing, if I lived anywhere outside of the United States, at 50 years, when I turned 50, they would tell me, listen, it's time for you to go and enjoy the rest of your life and have these young guys come.
Yeah, it's time
and
to
take
step
you-
off.
step
Yeah, it's
off
time
and take you-
exactly.
And that's the way it is everywhere else, except here.
Here.
It is also messed up that, I'm having a mental health problem or whatever, but then my insurance is so messed up because I can't even pay for insurance. Nobody wants to take me. So you're going in there. So all those things contribute to it.
It's
So-
a vicious circle all
yeah, and
around.
that's the way it's supposed to be. You see, people have to realize that, hey, listen, yeah, it's a business, and this is what it is, and that has to change. So once that changes, you're gonna see a lot of things are gonna change. I remember growing up, outside. You had to be outside the house. Like you were not cooped up in the house, social media, doing that stuff. You couldn't do that.
It wasn't there anyway.
It wasn't there. Yeah, it wasn't there. You couldn't do that. You had to be outside. Go play basketball.
play
Go
bas-
have friends. Go do that. So you mean to tell me, back then compared to back to now, what is the big difference? Why is it so prevalent? So why is everybody showing up with all these mental health issues so prevalent now than it is from back then? Obviously,
Yeah.
you were out. You got exercise. You were out doing things. You had to interact with people. Part of the issue is that you have your phone. You're talking to the world over a computer screen, but you're not interacting with a person. It's a big difference between actually sitting there next to somebody and being able to interact with them, where you can actually touch them to do things. There's certain things that you learn to do. Like Mike Tyson said it best. Social media makes it where people, don't get punched in the face. You know what I mean? Like
They
you
can
do
say
your
stuff
thing.
and
They say stuff, and you're not gonna be scared to say this or that, but you never interact with somebody. If you're actually sitting next to somebody, you have to really think about what you're gonna say.
But you know something,
The person
Verity?
could actually.
What you said is very true about the social media thing, because even sitting down with your family at dinner, people have their phones out. I mean, and they're just there, you know, like I dread coming up with this Thanksgiving dinner because all my family and friends, the young people is on their tablets or on their phone. They're not interacting with us.
Yes,
The older people are talking.
So think about it. So if you're going through something and I'm depressed, right? Back then you'd be able to pick somebody out that was depressed. You talk to them. You're like, what's going on with you? Like,
Yeah,
what's
what's
wrong?
up?
Right.
I don't see you doing this. I don't see you doing that anymore. When you're here every day and you're on social media, who are you talking to? You're talking to yourself. You're talking to yourself.
Yeah.
And then you're not even gonna know you have a problem because you're interacting with the computer.
Computer. Yeah.
There's no interaction
Yeah.
between people.
And most people only post when they're up. You know,
Mhm.
people don't really post when they're down. So it looks like everybody's up on social media, and when you're feeling down, you feel like the only one. And I try to explain this to the young people that I work with on a regular basis. They're like, "Oh, everybody on social media looks rich, and I'm trying to get to this." And
exactly.
I'm like,
And
they
they're not.
don't show how they got there.
It's not even how they got there. They have a whole
What they
bunch
have
of
to
them where
do.
they were faking. They were
Yeah, exactly.
fake money and doing this, and then you think, so you know.
Stage.
But I do. So really and truly, I think right now one of the big things that contributes to mental health issues is social media. They need to get rid of it.
Okay. Something that, you know, continuously bothers me with our society is that we wait till things escalate to the point of people walking around with, you know, rifles and stuff and just shooting up people. And then, oh, we have a problem. I mean, come on. I said this last week. I know people have family and friends. Do you not realize that there's something wrong with your friend or your family member? Something is off. I mean,
Well,
you have to see something.
How are you supposed to know? How are you supposed to know? If every day, so I have two children, a daughter that's 14 and a son that's 16.
Okay.
How are you really supposed to know what the hell is going on with them when they're in their room all the time? You have to basically drag them out of the room and off the phone to
Absolutely.
get them to interact, them to find out that something is actually wrong with them.
You have to drag them out.
And I say this because I'm in this field and I deal with you know, people who have issues, right?
Yeah.
So my son, he's one of those who suffer from he doesn't want to go outside. Does not want to go outside. And you know, he decided that he wasn't gonna go to school for a little while. He would get up and put on his clothes and he would go to school. He'd go to school.
Okay.
So, and he is afraid of really being outside. So now you have to get a therapist and you have to get stuff. And that's with all your kids. That's with all of them. So his problem is you find out because they're gonna call him and be like, "Yo, he hasn't been in school."
School.
For a while.
Right.
Then you find out.
Right.
But then you have the other ones which that's not the issue, is that they're not outside, they're depressed. They've been bullied. There's something going on. You really don't know.
Right.
And then when you find out is after they take your gun and they've shot some people.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
And then people also forget this. When they talk about these people that's shooting and they're like, "Oh, why would he go in there and shoot everybody up?" Right? If I'm getting so when I was in school, and if I'm getting bullied, everybody knows who's bullying me. I'm not just being bullied by him. Everybody knows I'm getting bullied. So the fact that I'm getting beat up every day and 1, 2, 3 is not saying anything, I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna shoot him, and I'm gonna shoot the 3 of you.
Yeah, because
Why?
you're not saying,
Because you're not saying
anything.
The complicit to the.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
It's
you
almost
are
like you're condoning it.
They said that.
condoning it. So
Yeah.
you are part of the victimization process. So they're gonna shoot you too.
Yeah.
That's the way it is. And then you have other violence where, think about it, people are poor. Stuff is going up. Your wages are not going up.
Right.
You mean to tell me that if I go to jail, I come out, I can't get a job, they wouldn't give you a job? What are you going to do? You go back to what you know how to do. And unfortunately, especially in our community, Black and brown communities, we have a lot of trauma that nobody talks about. Because in our community, what happens? You come out of jail, Black people usually victimize Black people. They're afraid to really go outside and victimize everything. See, if they were victimizing outside the community, then I guarantee you,
People
a
would
lot of
talk
stuff
about
A
it.
lot of stuff would change. If they came home and they said, you know what, I'm going to Williamsburg, we're going to rob all these people. I guarantee you, things would change. Somebody's going to be like, listen, you don't want them black people coming back over here. Things need to change. And then things will change.
And as minority people, we accept certain things within our community,
Exactly.
where we live. We tolerate certain things as opposed to saying, no, this can't go on. You know, like even where I'm living, you know, the young people, a lot of the young people, they smoke, they carry on, and it's okay. It's not okay,
It's
but it's okay. Nobody's saying anything. So then again,
what happened to like, and it's in the music, it's in everything. So when you talk about mental health, yes, I think we can solve this whole mental health
yes.
issue, but things have to certain change. Like I remember growing up, like in my house when I grew up on. So I was born in '79, so I get '80s baby. So, and I was telling somebody the other day that basically, if you were born in after '86, if you're born after '86, you're basically that's that new generation where things just started going straight down. Because it's a whole different thing. I remember growing up, I didn't listen to rap music. I know Michael Jackson. I know all the whole thing where the music was not violent.
Right.
That's
Where
true.
they were not talking about violence and shooting you. Right now,
It wasn't
I think-
glorifying.
It wasn't glorifying it. Right now, I take the train every day, and every day I get up, I'm like, yo, I gotta pray that I don't want to kill one of these little kids. Like it just bugged me. Like there were certain things that you did, like if somebody in the community was messed up, you know, like nah, Timmy's over there, he's not looking too good. Timmy needs some help. Let's go get Timmy some help.
Yes.
Things like that happen nowadays. That's not the thing. People are afraid to say, hey, listen, I think something is wrong. You need some help. And then the bigger issue is like you have children raising children.
Yes.
So there was no respect. There's no like something is wrong. There's no fatherhood. There's no motherhood. There's no nothing. Because there's a child who's raising somebody who's
The
also a
child.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, it happens. So you go on the train. You have. I remember back then, you went on the train and you see children knew to sit down.
Yeah.
You didn't run around. You see little kids nowadays running around the pole. And then you want to get up and slap the mom and you say, hey, listen, control
This is dangerous. Yeah.
control your child. Like it doesn't
But the
happen.
parents are going to slap you.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It doesn't happen because it's children raising children.
Children.
Back in the days, like you don't like, oh, you know what, I can't do this because what you call it's in there,
Yes.
different thing. But
Yeah.
nowadays it's not like that. So
Yeah.
I think and all that contributes to bad mental health.
Mental health.
Yeah.
Because it's just traumatic.
I heard someone said, and I thought this was very true. It could be true. They said the crack era took most of the black fathers out the home, and now today the music is taking black women. And I was like, wow, that's powerful because
No,
it
that's very
really,
true.
like, if you listen to the music and the people that they have at the top, women MCs are really killing it right now, but the message is pretty
Horrible.
consistently horrible.
Yeah.
So, and I really tried to talk to my young people about, really not taking that all so much to heart. They really think they need lashes and long nails and all these things and wigs and stuff to really come out cute. And I'm really trying to help these young people empower themselves and understand that the true love and true beauty comes from the inside.
That's true.
And, but I think, again, that's a mental health issue because nobody else is telling them that.
But as minorities, we'll always have been suffering from that self-image character. Oh, somebody's lighter than me. Somebody has longer hair. Your hair is curly, mine isn't. We have that that's an inner struggle
Right.
as minorities that we feel that way. And that's going back from slavery. The lighter person is the better person, the straighter person with the straighter hair, and and we still have that mentality. Even though that's why with all the wigs, with all the eyelashes, the nails down to here, I mean, we're saying something.
So
We don't feel right about ourselves, except we look like this.
So if you really look at it, a lot of that stuff is social media.
Yeah.
Media in
And
general.
then, media in general is people, they're on there and they're promoting this stuff. You mean to tell me that if, like, for instance, I can't stand sagging pants. I can't stand it. I can't stand it. So you mean to tell me that if these rappers suddenly decide that sagging pants is out, I'm not gonna wear sagging pants anymore, and start pulling up their pants and dressing with size appropriate stuff,
So-
right? Not too tight, not too skinny, but fitted
Fitted
stuff.
So, yeah.
You mean to tell me that the children wouldn't change?
Yes, they would.
They
Yes,
would.
They would.
Right.
They would.
So why is it that these people who are, let's say, the rappers, who are, why are they not changing?
Well, they're out. We consider them our
It's
leaders.
not even, and they shouldn't be.
Not I.
And they shouldn't be, but we consider them. And then you have to really think about it. So I was watching one of the podcasts the other day, these little shorts, and Joe Buttons was on there, and he was talking to J. Cole. J. Cole is very, very positive and stuff. That's what he says. And he says, J. Cole, stay away from these gangster rappers, because after you interact with them, all of a sudden now they're making songs like they want to save the children and stuff like that. He's like, I don't want to hear that shit. Why not? That's what you think you would want to hear. You want them to stop killing each other out in the street. You don't want to victimize.
But actually, we want it to happen so that it fills up the prisons. There's more people that die.
Yeah,
We get people
'cause
off the
prison-
planet.
But
More
it's
people
not
that
even-
die and we're not
it's
here.
the plan, but you gotta think about it. But prison system, that's the new slave plantation.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it
I
is.
mean, the workforce could be considered so too. But I think overall, the media is a strategic plan against, communities like ours, which is why I really appreciate like our media network. It's another message. It's a different message. It's saying something else that the rest of the world is not saying, or maybe not saying loud enough.
I agree with that, Delicia. I am very happy to say that our World Media Network just received our first recognition from the Black community as a very good Black media company. We got a very special award last month, and for delivering high top information and stuff to the community. And that's something that I really want to continue. That's why I created this special podcast called Let's Talk About It with Me and You and the Community. Because I wanted people to be able to come to where we're at and talk to us and give them information, pamphlets, stuff like that, letting them know how they can get help. And just saying, it's okay that you're not okay. Because people feel that it's I can't say that I'm not okay. But I'm saying I'm not okay.
Right.
And I think we also need to start, which I agree with what you're saying, we just need to start creating our own platforms
Right.
and our own different different ways of helping people, our own organizations to help people, because being in the mental health field. So I was a teacher before.
Yes, that's true.
So
That's
teacher
true.
before. So I taught everything from kindergarten up to, I guess you could say, college too, because I
Yeah.
also coach track. So I've taught quite a bit. And let me tell you something. Teaching is the worst job. It is the worst job I wouldn't say in the world, but it's the worst job, especially dealing in terms of, let's say, like New York City.
Tell us
Because-
why. Talk about it.
Because you cannot, as a Black male, you're there and you're like, so I always like working in the hood. So I've worked in worst parts of Queens, worst part of Brooklyn, And the thing is, you find a lot of talent there that you don't see, and it's a different way of thinking that you don't ever see in like the rich parts. Because I've taught in Whitestone and stuff like that, and then the kids, you see them there, and when you propose different things to them, the creativity that you get in the hood is a lot different than in privileged areas. But when you're in the hood, all they're concerned about is like they're failing these classes and stuff. And then you're like, well, if you change this or you taught them this, they might be more interested in doing it. Like, as the teacher, because So my degree is in education and special education, mass in education and special education. So you teach people who are supposedly can't learn.
Right.
Sped ed kids.
Yeah.
My daughter says, sped ed kids. So
Special ed.
yeah. So the thing is, so a lot of them. So I'm also a reading coach, and that's usually when you find that kids, you find it where if your son or whoever has like a learning disability or anything,
The
you find it in reading,
reading.
not math. It's usually the reading.
Reading.
That's where you'll find out
Yeah.
like something is wrong. It's the reading, But I had kids because you also teach math intervention, and so a lot of kids they don't understand decimals. It's weird, right? But if you said, well, $1.25 is a decimal, it changes. You can actually look now, and you're able to add up and see exactly what it is.
Mhm.
So if you really think about it, $1.25
cents.
is 1.25.
Right, correct.
Actually, a decimal.
Yeah.
So if you're having trouble with it, but then all of a sudden now you look at it as I'm adding dollars and cents, it's a totally different thing.
Yeah, in your mind.
In your mind, it's totally different. So, and this is people who are having trouble with it, like not understanding it.
But you're giving them a different access point.
Yeah, something different. You just change the way they look at it. It's like totally different.
Yeah, different perspective.
Different perspective. It's like, oh wow, this is easy now.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
That's true. Gentlemen, I'd like to talk to Paul and Verity about something that we was discussing before we actually got on the air, and about the different services, because I want this show to be about how to help people and how you can obtain different services to continue your life here in New York City or any place else. Can you please explain to me the services that you provide where you work and the services that you provide where you work, because the community needs to know all these type of services that's out there and how they can achieve it, how they can get it.
So in the building that I oversee, we're basically like maintenance services. So basically, you come in there, we give you housing, start your housing. So you're given housing, and then you're assigned a case manager, program specialist, peer specialist, different things, and then they help you, navigate the ins and outs of life. You need a therapist. They'll help you get a therapist. You need to get social security. You need different things. They help you. So caseworkers, they help you get that. Or but that's not. Those are like maintenance services. So what kind of services do you really want? Like, do you want services to like help, like drug abuse, mental health, domestic violence? There are
Right.
different agencies that specifically do different things.
Correct.
Case managers, on the other hand, like after you come into a building, our main service is housing. We'll give you housing. That's what we do, is housing. And then everything in all the services we give you is to help you maintain housing. Yes.
Paul, I know you do something similar. Tell me, what do you do on a daily basis?
Yes, very similar to what he just described. The building that I oversee, it's what we call an 80-20 building. So 80% of the building is for the community. The other 20% is for people who have mental health or substance abuse issues. The people who my program oversees come directly from the shelter because of a contract that we have with the shelter system. So exactly what he said, we basically have what we call maintenance services. After we house them, if you need certain services, Social Security, you need to get your HRA case open, you need a psychiatrist, therapist, medical, daycare to get your kids enrolled in school. Like, we have multiple services. Now, throughout the agency, because it's very big, we have a plethora of other services that you may need. But again, once we meet with you and we get you housed, now we're able to determine exactly what services that you need. And sometimes there's services that we have that you aren't even aware that you can benefit from.
Okay. Now, also, I wanted to ask you, how does the other population, whatever is 60% of the rest of the population of the building, how do they feel about being around people that has mental illness, substance abuse? I mean, or people that just came out of incarceration, because now it's like prevalent. It's out there.
So I mean, in a lot of them, a lot of them don't like it.
Okay.
So they have buildings from other agencies that are like, let's say, in Brooklyn Navy Yard. That's predominantly affluent neighborhood. They have, let's say, downtown Brooklyn, right by BAM. Those buildings, a lot of them are just like that because almost everything going up, that's how it is. So part of the issue is there's like subtle segregation in a lot of these buildings. So when you go in, like when you go into certain buildings, people who are suffering from mental health issues, first of all, you don't even know that there's a case management office there or anything that you would never know unless somebody told you. Then when you go in there, so they're housing some of them in studios. So the way that the building is designed, if all the studios are on the left side and all the other apartments, 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedrooms are on the right side, you know where you are. At some point you're gonna be like, hey, something is wrong. There's something wrong with that side over there. Or sometimes it's done by floors.
Yeah.
Right.
So a friend of mine lived by the Brooklyn Navy Yard. She lived at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. She was in a building, and so let's say the top floor, this is at 12 floors. So let's say the top 2 floors, you usually find them, but when you ask like what they did, they either had high positions working for the city, they either were doctor, lawyer, some weird something that they did, but very high number of money they were making.
Mm-hmm.
Then you go back and you go down, go further. So you have like 10, 10, 9, 8. You find a lot of municipal workers. They're working for the city. People that you can definitely, if they were to act up, they're going to lose their job immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then when you get down to like 3 and 4, the cops are usually, when they come to the building, they're usually addressing issues that will be on like 3 and 4. Okay. So you have to think like, okay, I know if I go to the top floor, you know where you are. When you're around like 3, 4, 3, 4, and 5, and the cops are always there, that's kind of like shelter, low income.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, and these are all the buildings. They might tell you, no, there's a building downtown Brooklyn that they have 2 entrances. So depending on where you go,
What?
so one side of the building is very affluent, on the affluent side of the street, and then the other side of the building where the other entrance is, but it's the same building, just 2 different entrances on the thing, and then depending on what you are. So if you're coming from the not so good side, you're like 305 this side, and then if you're on the good side, you're like 505 this street. And they have it downtown, Brooklyn. They can say whatever they want. But I'm telling you,
I believe
the
you.
building downtown
Yeah,
is
this is
segregated like
true.
that. A lot of those buildings are segregated like that. So if you go, depending on how
Yeah,
much
I
you
know.
make, it's segregated.
Now, what happens to the amenities? Because some of these new buildings, they have a swimming pool. They have, like a
Well,
movie theater. So
yeah.
what do they do?
Well, I can't speak. Well, one thing I must say, let me say that I commend my agency
Okay.
because in the building that I oversee, we do not do that.
But his agency, the building, the people that come in are all from the same thing.
Okay.
So I've been in buildings. So we're talking about buildings that they're getting people from the community and Housing Connect and stuff like that.
So there's
His difference, because they have buildings that are just that.
Now, there's certain parts that he did say that the question that you asked is how do the people from the community, how do they feel about the people who, let's say,
Underserved.
Okay, perfect. Underserved. So in my interaction with them, they seem, it varies. You have people who, because they have family or friends who have been in that position, completely understanding their situation. Then you have other people who have not experienced that and may not have any friends or family who have experienced the shelter life. And they look at it like, oh, why do I have to? If I would have ever known that I was going to be living amongst people who are coming from the shelter, I would have never taken the apartment.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I figured people would say. And I'm paying $2,000 or $3,000 rent, and
And
maybe
then
you're
people-
paying $200.
Yeah.
Right. So you do have people who, have that reaction.
Okay.
And sometimes you're just unable to have them see it any other way.
But then you have to, a lot of them, you have to kind of knock them down a little bit and tell them, well, hey, listen, first of all, everybody, the building, so all these buildings are rent stabilized. So if you're making $100,000 a year and you're paying 30% of your income, it's definitely going to be higher than somebody making $100 a year and they're paying 30% of their income. So really and truly, technically, you're paying about the same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
You just happen to make way more.
Right.
Right. So sometimes, yes, that math is excellent. And that is ways that I have spoken to some people before, the ones who would like to listen.
But now the thing that people are, well, I'm paying $3,000 something dollars.
probably making
Why should I have to?
$100,000.
Why should I have to associate with these people? Because we are always.
But the question
They
is,
are here.
the thing is, the way I answer them is, you don't have to apply through a lottery and stuff like that, because there's still buildings out here that are not rent stabilized, and you make enough since you're paying $3,000. That means you're in the high figures. That means that you can go and you can live somewhere else.
But now keep in mind, they chose not to do that.
Right,
I'm
exactly.
making $100,000 a year. I do not want to pay $7,000 a month in rent. So I will apply to the rent stabilized or low income housing. And again, once I get accepted, I'm making $100,000. I'll pay $3,000 a month in rent. Sometimes those same people have issues with people who have come from the shelter, formerly homeless. You understand? Because they are paying $215 a month in rent and I'm paying $3,000. I shouldn't see them. I shouldn't be around them. They shouldn't even know who I am. Right, but again, low income is rent stabilized for everybody, not just for them. It's also for you too. It's just you were fortunate enough to have a well-paying job. So some people get it, some people don't.
I think the big thing here is that they need to normalize mental health. And I think a lot of people don't recognize that, as from when we first started, everybody has some kind of mental health quirk about them. Just varying degrees, but everybody.
Believe it or not, if each one of us met with a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and remember, it takes 5 times for you to meet with one in order for them to give you an accurate diagnosis. Each and every one of us would be diagnosed with something. Nobody would walk in there 5 different times, and at the end, when you ask, okay, well, what was the diagnosis for Mr. Bartley? Oh no, he's normal. Whatever that is, he's normal. No, everybody is going to be diagnosed with
something. As long as you're honest and tell people the truth.
And that you see and that's part of trauma. What it is, you're afraid to really be true to yourself because of how you'll be judged.
Well,
that's a traumatic.
That's very true.
Nobody's perfect.
That's why I'm sorry, I'll get right back to you. That's why I find this show very personal, because I make no bones about that. I have suffered from bipolar disorder, and I've been suffering from it since about 18 years old. But just in the past 20 years, it has been addressed, and I address it with medication and therapy. But it's there, and I still live a normal life. And I want people to realize, that's why I want to be the face to say, you can live a normal life. You can enjoy everything, but you have to address these issues when they come to the table. Not addressing it will create problems.
I agree.
So I want people to be very aware that, listen, I'm here and you can talk to me. I understand. Delisty, I know you was going to say something and I cut you off.
Yes. About the housing. So for someone who's interested in starting the process of finding housing because they have, different social issues, mental health, substance abuse, where would they start the process?
I think you would start it with New York City Housing Connect. I mean, so it really depends on your circumstance. So if you're homeless, I know a lot of people describe the shelter as as one of the worst places to ever be. Some people told me that they would rather be in jail than the shelter.
Wow.
And in some shelters, yes, I can see, like especially the after hours things, your stuff gets stolen, things like that. So yes, um, they can do a better job of basically taking care of people within the shelter. But if you're a mother and you are homeless and you have children, women's shelters are some of the safest shelters that you can go, especially if you're a domestic. So let's say that you are a woman and you're suffering from domestic violence at the time, you have children, go to a domestic violence shelter. They will take you, your children, and they will give you a voucher. They will give you everything, and you will be considered priority for housing. So women, children, you're like number one priority for housing. Depends on you. So if you're a single man or a single woman and you are working, the shelter is probably a good place for you too because you go in there. So the shelter has so many options that a lot of people don't know. So let's say you had family in California and you went into the shelter and you're like, hey, listen, my aunt in California has a house and she's going to take me in. They would give you transportation. They will ship your stuff to California and make sure once they know that somebody's going to receive you there, they will ship you there. They have programs where if you're working and you said, hey, I'm working, I found a job in New Jersey and I can pay the rent after 2 years. They will make sure that you're working. You have the job in New Jersey. They will find you housing in New Jersey and pay the rent for you for at least 2-3 years until and that allows you to save money until you are able to take over in that third year or second year and continue to go. They have
I'm sorry for cut you. There's only one other thing. There's more criteria to that than just that simple. Because some people are going to walk in the shelter and say, hey, I heard that you're going to. There's more criteria to that.
Okay.
This is just to let you know that the services is there.
It's there.
You are to do the research once you meet with the actual worker who runs the shelter. Like, for instance, if she had children and she wanted to go into the shelter, exactly what he said can happen. Do know that you have to go to the PATH shelter, which is for women, for families, meaning a woman with children, a man with children. Just like if you're a single man, like he mentioned, and you wanted to go into the shelter working or non-working, you would have to start off at Bellevue Men's Shelter, which is where they would give you what's called a HA number. That HA number so that they can track you throughout the shelter system. They will then find you housing. You might not be able to live in Manhattan. The shelter might not be down the street and around the corner, but they will find you a bed within the New York City limits for you to be able to stay at. You will not have to sleep on the street again.
so
Is the shelter and the housing the same or different?
no, you
Two
usually get
different things.
different things. So it depends on how it is. But so and usually a lot of the criteria that they want you to have to get these things are very minimum. They're not so it's not like you're going in there and you're gonna have to do like jump through a whole bunch of hoops. A lot of because part of the shelter process within the shelter has been so limiting. You know what I mean? They've dumbed down the process and what you have to do. Sometimes they require you to find a job. It depends on the program that you're in. And then right now, like I tell a lot of people, right now, since we have this immigrant problem, if you are homeless, this is the best time as a current New York City resident. Like I was born here, you grew up here, and that's your situation. It's the best time for you to get in the shelter because you go in there and you're like, well, listen, you moving Joe Immigrant and Joe Immigrant out of here. Hey, and they're trying to get people in and out. So they like cutting the process in half. Like, oh, you're in the shelter. Hey, we have an apartment just open up. There you go. Go see it. You like it? Take
Okay,
it.
The
so
process have definitely changed since the asylum seekers have come
Okay.
about.
They've made it
because
so easy for
Yes,
you to
Really?
get out.
yes, and the mayor recently just made a change too, where before when you went into the shelter, they had a specific amount of time to find you a unit. Now they have cut that even in half because exactly what he said, they're trying to get you in and out.
Out.
well, it's good to hear that the process is all about leading you to, independence, right? Is that what it is?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
And
but
then-
the key is to keep your apartment once you get it.
Yeah.
It's not one of those revolving doors where you go there and you live for a year and okay, I don't like it here no more, and then just return
And then-
back to the shelter or walk away and leave the apartment to somebody else. There's key steps in order for you to keep from becoming homeless ever again in your life.
And then they have other outside agencies that their job is basically to put pressure on the shelter to get
Get you out.
people to do what they need, what you need to do. So I worked for an agency and I was a care manager. So I did, and working for them, I was basically, my field of expertise was housing, was finding people housing. There are different ways to do it. So I had clients who were living in apartments and they were about to get kicked out. And I can tell you that he didn't want to go in the shelter. He didn't want to go in the shelter. He had some medical issues. What I did, I called APS. So Adult Protective Services, what a lot of people don't know is, let's say, APS can give people vouchers without you having to ever enter the shelter. A lot of people don't know that, but they were able to do it. Same thing with ACS. If you have a problem and it's they do work, and then sometimes it depends on the worker you get. They'll tell you no, they can't do it.
True.
But if they deem it necessary for you to get it,
You can get
they
it.
can call and they can be like, yo, listen, I need this to be done.
Same thing with the CPS services.
Yes. So it really depends. So a lot of these agencies that help you that tries to, they can get you vouchers and stuff depending on your situation. It has to be, the worker has to have a great heart, and the worker has to really deem your situation needing this.
Right.
But it can be done.
Right. One of the key things is the worker have to also understand the system, because you get workers who are brand new to the system and they quick to answer you. However, the answer that they're giving you is incorrect, but they don't know that it's incorrect. You understand? Because they haven't done their research. Their supervisor hasn't explained to them that this is the services that we do have. These are the things that we can offer. You understand? Because basically, I've worked in the shelter system as well. And usually when you start working, you have to hit the ground running. You know what I'm saying? So you really do need to be educated on how the actual shelter system works, the services that they provide, the vouchers that they do have. A lot of people don't even know that they have medical shelters, meaning if you have a medical condition, we're not going to put you in the general population shelter. We're going to put you in the medical shelter because you have a colostomy bag and it needs to be changed on a regular basis. And we already know that if you're homeless, most of the time you have it or do not have all of your necessities that you're going to need to change this bag on a regular basis, keep it from being infected, so forth and so on. So
They
they
have veteran shelters too.
Right. So they have shelters that's designed for people who have medical conditions. Exactly what he said. They have shelters for people who specifically have served in the military. You understand? They have safe haven shelters for women who have in domestic violence situations. So there's a plethora of different sort of shelters. But again, if you don't know the system and you don't know how it works, how can I tell you these things if I don't even know them?
And yeah. So,
Yeah.
right now, if you live in New York City
City.
and you're homeless, there is no reason that you should be homeless. And then a lot of people, so when you go into the shelter, it really depends on you, the person, because there's some people that go in the shelter and they will sit there for 2 years because they feel the worker is supposed to get you housing, but they've given you all this documentation. And then you just sit there and you're like, well, I'll just wait till they find me something. They have a whole bunch of other people. And then
Right.
if he's in the, if Pauline is in the shelter with you and she's every day on his neck, like, yo, listen,
She's gonna get.
I want to get out of here in 6 months. And you're just like, well, and that's usually what happens.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
there's
It's, you
housing.
have a part to play. Just because you're in the shelter does not mean that I now just sit back and wait for my worker to do all of the work. Yeah, there's work to be done. But guess what?
Do 50% of the work as well.
50. 90% of
okay.
the work is on the actual person who is homeless.
Okay.
10% of the work is on your worker.
Because they just have to give.
Once I
documents and
provide
stuff.
you with the information, I provide you with, okay, this is a voucher that you have. These are the rules, regulations, and the stipulations. And here is the places that you can start your search to look for housing. And you say, okay. And then you go back to your room and you throw it underneath the thing and it sit there for 3 months. You can't come to me every day and say, you ain't find me housing yet.
So
It don't work like
yeah,
that.
so that's like if you're a regular and you're undiagnosed. So let's say you're diagnosed with, let's say, major depression, and you have a family. There are buildings that are designed for people who the head of household is diagnosed with mental health issue, and you can have it, and they will house your family and everything in there. A lot of buildings like that too. So there's the HRA 2010E for family and the HRA 2010E for single adults. So you can also do that, and that's if you have a diagnosed mental health condition, can be anxiety, can be depression, PTSD,
Bipolar.
bipolar. It really doesn't matter. Once it's documented on paper that I have this, you can go and they will find you housing. HRA 2010. Now, in that case, they ask you to go get certain documents like, physical TB test. They ask you to get your psychosocial. So those things, after you get that, then you basically give it to the your worker. And then in that case, because it's like they have to apply to those things, in that case, then you will wait. But you have to get that initial
And
documentation
that's
they ask
what
for.
all of those things are considered diagnosed is when you have all this, the documentation from a doctor.
Once you have a therapist or psychiatrist that says she is diagnosed with this,
Okay.
Yeah.
even if you're diagnosed, because so the building I operate is a 1515 building. So if you have a substance abuse, so let's say you were once a heroin user or once crack addict or marijuana user, and you're diagnosed with cannabis use disorder or cocaine use disorder, whatever. So right now, marijuana is legal. Everybody's
Has a
probably
disorder.
has a cannabis use disorder. But I'm making fun of it. But I mean, if you're documented down like that, you can end up in one of these 1515 buildings, and basically that's it.
The one thing that a lot of times people don't understand, especially when you're using that HRA 2010E that he mentioned, or you're a part of the 1515 program, is the word program.
So you have to see a case manager and different things.
That is the key thing, because a lot of people do not want to participate in a program. They want you to give them the keys, let them sign the lease. You walk away and go about your way, and I go to my apartment, and then I never receive any services because I don't need any. Even though you became homeless some type of way.
Yeah.
Even though we have it documented that you have mental health, substance abuse, domestic violence, and a whole lot of trauma in your life, they don't want these services
And usually, all you have to do is see that person once a month.
if they want to participate in the
In
program.
the program.
This is excellent.
I
A
do.
program that supports you and
And supports you,
leads
and a lot of
hopefully
people-
to independence.
And there are a lot of
If you
people.
are stable, it makes sense. When you're not stable, what makes sense to you is give me the keys. I never want to see you again. Oh, by the way, before you walk away, don't forget, pay that 70% of my rent and I'll just pay the 30. But I never want to see y'all again. Don't come to my house to visit me.
Right.
But a lot
Don't
of the
ask me
time,
about
yeah.
services because that's not what I want to do. Give me the keys and the lease and go.
Go.
So
I think-
here's a question about the word you said, stable. So how do you define that really,
Well, I'll let him go first.
For all of us stable.
Well, stable. Stable can mean a lot of different things, but it all depends on the person who you're talking to. I could feel like I'm stable, even though I hear voices and I see things and I smell things that other people don't. In my mind, to me, I'm stable. Why? Because I've been dealing with this my whole entire life. Now, to you, you might say that I'm unstable. Because when you see me, I'm walking down the street, I'm hollering, I'm screaming, and I'm yelling, and there's nobody around me. You understand? So it's a difference between the person who you're talking to and your clinical determination of stable. Now, if you are harassing everybody in the building who's going in and coming out, you understand? And you seeing things and you swinging in the air, but it's nothing around. or you keep calling the fire department because you're saying that something is burning in your apartment, and every time they respond, they find nothing. You would not be considered to be stable as far as a case manager, a housing specialist, you understand?
Yes.
Or a social worker would consider. So at that point, you would definitely need services. But remember, this is the person who said, give me the keys and give me the lease, and I never want to see you again.
So stable is really once you're not a danger to yourself or others.
Okay.
So I had a client who basically they didn't understand that. So I told them they were calling emergency services all the time, and I tried to explain to them that if you're somewhere and you're yelling like bomb and something like that, or you're yelling fire, I'm like, that does not only endanger you, it endangers other people.
yeah.
So you can be hospitalized for that. And I was like, it has nothing to do with you being in a program or anything like that. So I had to explain to them that you can be outside in Times Square by yourself, not associated with anybody there, and you're yelling fire and stuff like that, and they come over and they're like, you're causing a disturbance. They will take you to the hospital and you will be held against your will because you're endangering the lives of others and yourself.
All right. Well, let's leave that at that note. And you've been listening to Let's Talk About It with you and me. I'm Lady Pauline, and my co-host, Mr. Glenn Greenwich, Paul Barkley, and Delicia Davis. And thank you, my guests today, so much for the information. Mr. Rollins, it's been awesome having you. And I hope anybody that's been listening to this podcast, if you need any help or anything, call me at 646-340-7271. Glenn, how can they reach you?
929-330-4281.
Okay, Paul, is there a number for you?
I prefer email. You
Okay.
can email me at Paul, Paul, Bartley, Bartley, 04 at yahoo.com.
Delicia?
Delicia.davis@aol.com. DELICIA.DAVIS@aol.com.
Verity, how can anybody reach you if they need any services from you?
If they need any services from me, I guess it can be Rollins Verity, ROLLINS VERITY @gmail.com.
All right, audience. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I hope you can get some great information from it and listen to us for the next couple of weeks. We'll be on with different topics of mental health, substance abuse, and also we'll be covering prostate cancer. I'm finding out that a lot of my friends is being diagnosed with that, and a lot of people have asked me to do a show on prostate cancer to make more men aware of how they can get help and what the warning signs is. So please do not forget to listen to Let's Talk About It with me and you. Thank you all for watching and listening.